Good morning. Welcome to Yoga with Jenny. I have a dog playing with a toy, in case you're wondering what the squeaking is. So we're going to continue onward. This week is all about hip opening. And I use that term in quotation marks. I think a lot of times hip opening poses in yoga are about pushing and going further than our body might be willing to go. So as always, my approach is a little different. We're going to focus on mostly on stabilizing the low back and the pelvis itself so that we can actually begin to feel some more motion in the hip joint. And often this is really helpful for if you have just like niggling, like little low back pain at the end of your day. You may be holding yourself in such a way or moving in such a way that your hips are kind of tightening, and then up the chain, of course, the low back is what's kind of compensating for that. So we're going to kind of reverse that motion, try to hold steadiness in the low back and reinforce some movement patterns in the pelvis itself, the hips. So hip hinging is our practice today. Go ahead and come onto your back. Oh, and you're taking up my whole mat now. You're such a big dog. Hi. Go ahead and lie back. You can make yourself comfortable with some padding underneath your head if that helps your neck and shoulders feel more relaxed. Maybe begin by unwinding with some gentle twisting. I often think for many of us with lower back issues, we sometimes have one side that will hurt more than the other, one side that's more forward or twisted. So I think of some of these exercises as being like untwisting exercises, how we can feel a little bit more balanced and centered. Then come back to the center, speaking of centering, placing your hands on those hip bones. So hunting down the hip bones themselves. You think about the pelvis, those are the two sides of the bowl, the edges of the bowl on either side. And then take a couple deep breaths. Just simply pressing on those bones and feeling where your pelvis is. Feel how your pelvis settles onto the mat. Notice if it is a little lopsided without trying to fix anything. We're going to begin that process of kind of steadying the lower back and the pelvis with this deep core engagement. So in yoga, the terms we use are Mula Bandha, which is the lift of the perineum, and that Uddiyana Bandha, the lift of the abdominal wall, right? So as you inhale, all of those parts are moving and relaxing. And as we exhale, it's like we feel like we're lifting up within our body. Without adding tension. And go again. Deep breath. Notice if you feel other parts of yourself working. Neck and shoulders. Or those big muscles in the pelvis, especially the ones in the back. They tend to grip and grab, and then they limit our motion. So adding to that practice of lifting those low abdominals, those deep muscles in and up, we're going to do a simple leg motion. It is a leg lift, but I'm trying to move right underneath my fingertips. If I'm at those bones, I'm trying to move right at that hip joint itself and not move in my back. So I don't know if you can see the difference. Right here, my whole back has flattened down. My pelvis is very tucked and tilted. My pubic bone, actually, there, I'm on my pubic bone. It points up towards the ceiling, right? Instead of being in that neutral positioning. So I think of that motion as being motion, but with other parts holding, steadiness. So it's an exhale to engage, mula bandha, low belly, and one leg comes up. Put it back down. Exhale. Flattening that low abdominal wall. And then if this feels really simple, really easy, and you find that your pelvis is not rocking, you're not kind of buckling, or your back isn't tilting, then try to extend your knees and start with your legs straight. So a straight leg lift, it's just a longer lever arm. It's going to be heavier for your body to lift up. Included in this one is, of course, the hamstring muscle. So the closer your leg gets to your body, if you're tight, you may find you have to bend your knee, or else your back is really going to buckle. So just let it be bent. Just a little bent. But again, watch for that flattening of the low abdominal wall. Instead of having your belly kind of jump into your hands, it's really, really toning but flattening. And then in terms of the two sides, I'm not twisting or dropping to one side and then the other. And then bring one knee up. And just gently stretch the hip flexors on the opposite side. Maybe squeeze the buttocks, engage that muscle. And really hug the knee into your chest. And sometimes what's restricting our ability to lift our leg without our back moving are those tight hip flexors, right? Good, and then just do a quick round of little windshield wipers. Good, and then we'll come onto one side. Now if you have a TheraBand is the brand that I use, but if you have a stretchy band, or even tubing with handles, you just kind of hold on to the tubing and have it around the top foot. Basically what we're going to do is look at one leg doing that motion, while holding ourselves on our side is just going to make it a little bit more challenging to feel, to keep the steadiness and the balance between the two sides of our body and the back and front alignment, so that neutral spine. This is sideline marching. And I always like to remind people, if you're holding the band or the tubing and your hand that's holding the band, whether it's one or both, if it's moving, you're not providing resistance. So you do want to make sure that there is a good amount of tethering going on, like trying to hold it steady. Lift up your core, engage your belly muscles and that deep core stability. Lift your leg up and keep it parallel to the floor. So my foot is lifted but not turned up. My knee is lifted but not turned up. It's parallel to the other leg. And I'm just going to try to push into the resistance band to straighten my knee. But then here's that exercise, the same thing you did on your back. Can you bend your knee, bend bend at the hip without your back changing position? So many of us go in one of two directions. We either tuck everything under and flatten our back with our leg movement, or we overarch our back, trying to keep that position. So it's in the middle. It's that happy medium. It's a little bit hard to see. I know that where that band lies and where my leg lies, it's a lot of black. I'm kind of a sea of black today. Good, and then just take that leg and rest. So often what we start to feel is work in those outer hips. So it is your glutes, but it's kind of the portion that's on the side or the outside or even a little bit towards the top that you're going to be feeling. And for many of us, that is the part of our hip it's tight. It's kind of holding on when we sit for too long. And even if you don't find that you sit a lot, the other thing about our modern society is just that sitting is a way to get somewhere, right? So we drive, and then we go somewhere and maybe we sit, and then we come home and we sit. So the biggest difference is that we don't have a lot of change of levels, so going down into a squat or standing up and then bending the knees and then standing up and leaning over and standing up. So those shifts, those changing, those moving, those are all important to kind of help our hips learn to move and shift, right, and to have more strength. So I'm going to go ahead onto my other side. When I think of lying on my side and trying to get into a more or less neutral position, I kind of think of lifting my ribs into my body. So it's more extreme than just kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to lift my perineum up, but it's bigger. It's my whole torso being held in alignment. So not falling forward, not twisting, but also not falling forward, kind of arching or curling. So it's in the middle in terms of all the planes of motion in your body. And then you push against the resistance band. Oh, this is a little bit more clear on this side what my knee is doing, just because I'm at a slightly different angle. So the part that's really important is that slow, controlled bending. And I think for many of us, what that's really opening, to use that yoga terminology, is opening up the back of the hip, right? So it's letting those muscles that are in the back of our hip, our glutes, mainly glute max, and those little deep hip rotators, letting those muscles relax, including our pelvic floor as well in that picture. And that's what's missing when we don't have squatting in our lives. And I feel more strength in the outer and upper part of my glutes. Rest the knee in front of the other knee. So stretching those muscles a little bit. Roll to one side and come on up. We're going to take this motion into symmetry. So I'm working both sides of my body at the same time. You know, grain of salt. It may not be completely symmetrical. My body isn't. But we're going to try to move both sides at the same time. And basically it's that same motion. It's that hip motion without your back moving. So I like to start right up on hands and knees with my back neutral. So include your head in that neutral line. Include your pelvis. So you don't want to start out even with a teeny little bit of tucking under. You don't want to go exaggerate it by drooping your back down, but you don't want to tuck under. And then the motion is, again, practicing Mula Bandha, that subtler pelvic strength, and leaning back. We call this rock backs. I'm leaning at the hip joint or bending at the hip joint and moving as far as I can go into that squat, and then coming right back up on top. If you go and you start to feel like, oh, you know, I'm getting close to my heels, why don't I just go to my heels? You can see that my back started to round. You can see it in the, well, in my lower back, but also in my upper back starting to move. Again, that's movement in one part that is missing is your body's gonna compensate in other places. So instead of seeing that, I want you to move at the hip, hinging that joint, and then stop before you go into your back. So for many of us, it's really easy to go too far, is the point. So this is not child's pose. For many of us, it's not nearly there, nowhere near it. This is where some of the funnier yoga cueing comes in, right? Blossom the sit bones, open your pelvic floor. Anything that you can do to kind of lift and extend your tail, separate the sit bones, widening, opening, relaxing the muscles in the back, right? So anytime you find yourself tensing, you're probably starting to tuck under. And what I mean by tensing is even just that more subtle tensing of that perineum that really is too much in the tailbone region. So let that go and try to widen. And then come on up. So now we're going to practice this. Rest if you need to off of your wrists. Practice it with one side at a time. Of course. So shift your weight, reach, and then here comes that squatting motion with one hip. As my knee moves forward, I'm trying not to let my pelvis tilt, my lower back tilt, and just keeping that motion, practicing moving inside of the hip socket to bring the thigh forward and then bring the thigh back, bring the thigh forward, bring the thigh back. So often we hear cueing, because this is an exercise for your glutes, especially your glute max, the back of your hip. We hear something about, you know, protect your back by engaging your glutes. And often the quick route to engaging the glutes is to tuck your bottom under. But I'm just trying to distinguish, right? Yes, you want to be engaging in your glutes, but you do not want to be moving your back to do that, right? So that's involving other things. I want you to feel as you lift your Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, your belly, that you can engage the back part of your hip without having to go tucking under. And then as the knee comes forward, remember those muscles are lengthening. So they're getting a little bit of a break. They're getting to release. I'm just going to go to my other side for a few times. And for many of us, when we push against a resistance band, it's like a weight, right? It feels like a lot of work. It's like, oh, okay, I feel something. And then when we bend our knee, there's a kind of a tendency to like flop or release really quickly. That's the work in this exercise, is actually the bending. Slow it down. And notice if you slow it down and try to practice it moving a little bit more in the hip and less in your back, it gets a little bit tougher to control. Sometimes you get a little bit of shaky movement, or it feels like your muscles are unfamiliar with it a little bit. That's that instability talking. So then rest. You know, traditional child's pose has a combination of hip movement and back. So just let yourself lean back. We're going to come up through downward facing dog. And just pedal through your dog. And pause for a minute. Bend your knees. See if you can soften your shoulders away from your ears, but let those scapula be mobile. Let them be wide. And then think about the same motion that we've been practicing, the same stability that we've been practicing. So a nice deep breath in. As I exhale, I think about that low belly, pelvic strength, especially without tucking my tailbone under. And then I think about the hinge being at my hip joint. So often in downward dog, I see people pushing their head between their arms and kind of pushing into the shoulder joint to try to get a more flexible position, right? What I want you to do is kind of let the onus be at the hip joint. So I'm trying to move my hip joint itself up and back, bending. It does help to work with bent knees and soft shoulders. Good, we'll take a walk forward, feet to hands, hanging in a rag doll. So let your upper body hang and rest your neck and shoulders. And we'll do a roll up, so bringing the tailbone down and the pelvis forward to stack the bones back up on top of your pelvis. So now we're going to put this together into standing. So I really do think that this affects our practice, but it also affects our life. And so we want to think in terms of not just, yoga poses. So traditional squatting would be a chair pose or fierce pose. But this is about, let's just break it down. This is about reaching down to get your keys that you dropped on the floor, right? It's also your golf swing if you're a golfer. Can you lean down without hurting your lower back, right? So what I'm going to practice is that motion in the hip. So I'm going to start with standing tall, and I've got my feet separated, hips distance or a little wider. I'm going to soften my knees. So I'm not going to lock them out and have them ramrod straight. Softening my knees, lifting up through the crown so I feel aligned and tall without being rigid. Then that deep breath, that Mula Bandha. Lift through the perineum without tucking under with your tailbone. Lift through the belly without crunching. Go to your hips, and we're going to try to just move the hip hinge back. So this is just the movement in the hips with soft knees. And then coming back up nice and tall. So this is like that rock back motion where we're kind of taking the knees out of the picture. They're staying bent, but they're not bending and straightening. And if you're having trouble with this motion, I recommend doing it close to a wall so that as you hinge, you're going to bump the wall. I'm just going to make myself a line. There's my tailbone. And then you're going to come away from the wall. And feel as you come back, again, widening the sit bones, leaning from the hips without overarching and without tucking under. So the motion really is right underneath my fingertips. I'm leaning back and then I come back up. When we add our knees, when we go to come into chair pose, we have knees. So adding the knee joint into a squat creates, a whole host of other issues. You have arthritic knees, you have aging knees, you have tender knees. It will be harder, but if you can be more mindful of your position, you'll be less apt to hurt your knees. So you do want to see your toes. You still want to be able to see your toes. You don't want, in other words, to bend your knees over your toes. So again, the motion is like that hip hinge with my hips moving, but then I'm starting to bend my knees. And at the very base of the squat, my angle of my shins, right, my lower legs, and my torso, my upper body should be more or less parallel. So if you end your squat and you're down here, it's not biomechanically going to be great for your lower back, right? You're probably, chances are good, you're trying to stretch and work that lower back a little bit more. But on the other hand, if you're here and your body's kind of upright and your knees are bending more, you're really putting a lot of strain on your knees. So it's kind of specific, right? It's moving at the hip and the knee and the ankle. Only as far as you can go. And then you come back up. So just practice. And again, I like the usage of props. So my favorite prop for this is holding something that won't budge. This is great if you do have tender knees, right? Having something to hold on to will allow you to take a little bit of pressure back into the hips to feel that hip motion more than you're going to feel those knees. So I'm leaning back a little bit more, but I'm still bending my knees, right? It just takes a little bit of the work into my upper body. Then pull with your arms, push with your glutes, and come back up to stand tall. Hip hinge, unlock the knees, and then start to bend at the hips and the knees together. Come back up tall. So see if you practice these two motions, if your chair pose doesn't get a little bit easier. I'm not saying that it won't be challenging, especially as your teacher says, oh, hold 2 or 3 more breaths. So I'm coming down into my squat without tucking under, without overarching my back. So hopefully those low back, facet joints will be a little happier with me. I'm thinking about that lift in my low belly without tucking. And then stand up tall. Good, go ahead and come onto your back. And we end with unwinding. I started by saying, I think a lot of times our hips need to kind of practice. Twisting is a great kind of practice for unwinding. So sometimes giving yourself the chance to actually rest in a twist. Once you come back to center, sometimes the hips feel a little bit different. They've started to release a little more into balance. Or you can notice whether one side you're able to twist or it feels too hard. Right, back to center. Let those knees knock in together or straighten your legs. Rest, Shavasana. Last couple of breaths together. Let your breath be full and deep. If you're a person who has a more shallow breath pattern, then practice feeling your breath move under your ribs and down towards your belly. And then lifting up into your chest. Equally as important is that drawing together, the ribs and chest softening back down as you exhale. And then roll back to one side and come on up. May we be happy, may we be healthy. May we be at peace, may we live with more ease in our body, mind, and heart. Namaste. Hopefully you'll find this helpful. Just a short practice to focus on hip hinging over low back movement, and see what it's like. Test it out before practicing chair pose. See if it helps that any niggling low back pain that you feel at the end of the day as well, and give it a try.